The Samburu sunrise was a daily ritual, a breathtaking canvas of gold and rose painting the eastern sky. Dr. Imani Kijani, her dreadlocks tied back, a lean figure in practical khaki field gear, stood on the weathered porch of her research station. She sipped her coffee, the warmth a comforting anchor against the crisp morning air. This was her world, a symphony of predictable rhythms and profound wildness, a place where years of dedicated study had honed her understanding of its intricate balance. Today she expected the usual, the calls of hornbills, the distant grumble of elephants. Instead, a low, urgent rumble shattered the quiet. It was a lion's call, unmistakably, but imbued with a guttural desperation she'd never heard before. It wasn't a territorial roar, nor a hunting snarl, but something far more primal, laden with an almost human plea. Imani's hand paused, her mug halfway to her lips, and a prickle of unease snaked up her spine. This sound vibrated with an unfamiliar frequency, echoing in a way that defied every instinct about lion behavior she had ever cultivated. She reached for her binoculars, sweeping the golden savannah. Her gaze locked onto a familiar silhouette. Whisper. The magnificent lioness, named for her ghost-like ability to move unseen, emerged from the acacia thicket. But she moved with a dragging slowness, her powerful jaws gently clamped around something limp and small. A cub. Imani's breath hitched. Even through the powerful lenses, the cub's lifeless dangle was evident. Whisper continued her agonizingly slow approach, not to the waterhole, not to cover, but directly towards Imani's station. Her eyes, those piercing amber orbs, fixed on Imani with an intensity that transcended any predatory stare. 50 yards from the porch, Whisper carefully lowered the cub to the red earth. It lay motionless, a tiny, fragile bundle against the vast, indifferent landscape. The lioness did not retreat. She simply sat, her gaze unwavering, a silent, desperate expectation radiating from her formidable presence. Imani's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drum against the silence. This was impossible. Lions, by their very nature, avoided direct, prolonged contact with humans unless provoked or hunting. This deliberate approach, this undeniable appeal, shattered every scientific protocol, every instinct she possessed. It was an anomaly that defied all her training, an impossible conversation between species. The air crackled with a tension that was both terrifying and profoundly reverent. "Juma, you need to come immediately," Imani whispered into her satellite phone, her voice barely audible. Her hand trembled, the receiver cool against her ear. "It's Whisper. She's asking for help." The words felt absurd even as she spoke them, an admission of something unquantifiable, unscientific. Juma, Imani's grizzled assistant and a seasoned bushman, arrived swiftly, a younger colleague, Ben, trailing behind him. Skepticism was etched deep into Juma's weathered face. But before he could voice a single doubt, Whisper stirred. With slow, deliberate movements, she nudged the cub a few yards closer to the perimeter of the station. Her amber eyes never leaving Imani's, intensifying her impossible plea. The message was unmistakable. They approached cautiously, Imani leading. The cub, tiny and fragile, breathed in shallow, rattling gasps, its flanks barely moving. Juma knelt, his practiced eye quickly assessing the situation. "Severe pneumonia," he murmured, his voice grim. "Hours, maybe less, without intervention." Imani felt the cold weight of the dilemma descend. Helping meant breaking decades of strict, non-interference protocol, the cornerstone of their research. It meant risking her career, potentially jeopardizing the funding and very existence of the station. The ethical boundaries of wildlife research were sacrosanct for a reason: to prevent human dependency, to preserve the wildness of the wild. But how could she turn away from this, from a mother's impossible, heart-wrenching plea? The raw, overwhelming wave of compassion surged, eclipsing all rational thought, all protocol. "We have to try," Imani said, her voice trembling but resolute, a new steel entering her tone. The words were an acceptance of profound, personal and professional risk, a leap of faith into uncharted territory. Juma, his skepticism now replaced by a grim determination, moved with practiced efficiency. He prepared a syringe, injecting antibiotics into the cub's frail body. Ben, under Imani's direction, carefully set up a small oxygen mask. Whisper watched every single movement, her massive muscles taut beneath her golden coat, utterly still. There was no aggression, no fear, only an unprecedented act of desperate trust, a silent vigil that bound them all in a moment suspended between the wild and the human. Imani's porch, usually a space for quiet observation, transformed into a makeshift veterinary clinic. The small cub, nestled in a shaded crate, received regular doses of antibiotics and fluids. Whisper, meanwhile, became a constant, silent sentinel. She paced the perimeter of the research station, her powerful form a blurred shadow in the periphery, her low, comforting chuffs a steady heartbeat in the tense atmosphere. Every glance she cast towards the porch was laden with a profound vigilance, a mother's unwavering watch. Imani and Juma moved with a heightened sense of purpose, acutely aware of the extraordinary eyes observing their every action. On the third day, a miracle unfolded. The cub, previously a listless bundle, stirred with unexpected vigor. Its small eyes, cloudy just hours before, brightened. It attempted to push itself up, a weak but undeniable assertion of life. Imani and Juma exchanged a look of disbelief, then a shared exhale of profound relief. "He's turning," Juma whispered, his voice thick with awe, a rare display of emotion for the stoic bushman. The little cub was fighting and winning. That very dawn, as the first tendrils of light stretched across the savannah, Imani found it. A fresh haunch of antelope lay meticulously placed at her threshold, still warm from the kill. It was not a casual discard, but a deliberate offering. Imani stared, her mind struggling to process the image. She's sharing her kill," she stammered, the words feeling utterly insufficient to describe the unprecedented act. This wasn't simple cohabitation. It was an act of reciprocity, a profound, primal form of gratitude that defied all scientific understanding of animal behavior. The offerings continued, a surreal testament to Whisper's intelligence and gratitude. Impala, guinea fowl, a young warthog. Each morning brought a new, carefully arranged gift. Imani, driven by a blend of scientific curiosity and burgeoning wonder, meticulously documented everything. Photos, videos, detailed notes on the type of game, its placement, the time of discovery. The data she was gathering was rewriting every textbook she'd ever read. "She's not just feeding us," Imani White admitted, his earlier skepticism entirely replaced by a profound sense of awe. "She's acknowledging us as kin, as part of her pride." The implication hung heavy in the air. The lines between human and wild were blurring in ways they had never conceived. As the days turned into a week, the cub grew stronger, its playful chirps echoing around the camp. It still carried the remnants of its illness, but its energy was undeniable. Often, when Imani tended to it, the cub would look past her, towards Whisper, then back at Imani, a silent gesture that seemed to include her in their newly formed, improbable family. One evening, emboldened by the growing trust, Imani dared to step closer to Whisper, who lay a respectful distance from the porch. Whisper raised her massive head, her amber eyes locking onto Imani's. But she did not retreat, did not growl. The cub, now able to move with more agility, bounded halfway towards Imani, then, as if remembering its place, scampered back to its mother's side, nudging her flank. "Thank you," Imani whispered, the words heartfelt, raw. And Whisper, in a gesture that sent shivers down Imani's spine, dipped her great head, a subtle, profound acknowledgement that transcended language. The fragile peace, however, was about to be shattered. A few days later, while examining the site where Whisper had left a particularly large impala, Imani noticed something glinting near a disturbed bush. It was a snare, but unlike any she had encountered in her years in the field. She knelt, her gloved hand carefully retrieving the object. It wasn't the crude, rusty wire of a local poacher. This was different. The material felt slick and unnatural, a dark composite, intricately woven, designed for maximum efficiency and cruelty. It was a sophisticated piece of equipment, far beyond the scope of any traditional poachers she knew. "This isn't from around here," Imani muttered, her voice low, a prickle of unease spreading through her. She turned the high-tech snare over in her hands, its silent menace palpable. "This is engineered." The discovery suggested a darker, more organized presence in the savannah. a technologically advanced human threat lurking in the shadows, hinting at a broader, far more insidious agenda than simple poaching. The impossible bond she had forged with Whisper had perhaps unwittingly opened a door to a danger she couldn't yet comprehend, a danger that threatened not just individual animals, but the very essence of the wild. The sky over the Samburu began to darken with an ominous speed. Imani, standing on the porch, felt an uneasy prickle on her skin, a premonition that something profound was shifting in the air. The vibrant greens of the savannah muted to a deep, bruised purple. A profound silence descended, broken only by the distant, low rumble of thunder. Then, through the gathering gloom, she saw them. Whisper and her cub, now robust and playful, trotting with an unusual urgency. Their coats were already slick with the first fat drops of rain that splattered against the dry earth. They stopped barely 15 yards from the porch, a proximity that would normally trigger alarm, but now felt like an instinctual seeking of refuge. Whisper's amber eyes, usually so fierce, held a flicker of something akin to worry. Juma, sensing the shift, rushed out of the main cabin, binoculars already raised. His gaze swept the horizon. "Buffalo herd, look!" he shouted, his voice cutting through the rising wind. Imani followed his gaze. In the distance, a dark, churning mass was hurtling toward them. A buffalo stampede. Panic-stricken, thousands of pounds of muscle and horn, an unstoppable force of nature. The herd was wild, a living wave of destruction. If they crashed through the station, nothing would survive. The small cabins, the equipment, even the sturdy porch would be reduced to splinters. Imani's breath caught in her throat. Her mind raced, calculating their slim chances of escape. Then something happened that defied all reason. Instead of retreating into the bush, into the relative safety of the thickets, Whisper pressed her now recovered cub protectively behind her hind legs. Her gaze, a rapid fire between the humans and the oncoming tidal wave of buffalo, held firm. "She's staying with us," Imani breathed, the words a raw whisper of disbelief, the truth of it shattering her understanding of predator and prey. The storm broke with a primal fury. Sheets of rain lashed down, instantly drenching everything. Thunder cracked overhead like war drums, and lightning illuminated the charging herd in stark, terrifying flashes. The ground vibrated with the thunderous drumming of hooves. The buffalo were seconds away. Imani froze, clutching the porch railing, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. Then, Whisper let out a roar. It wasn't the territorial challenge of a lion asserting dominance, nor the hunting growl. This was different, sharp and commanding. A summons. It was a sound that resonated deep within Imani's bones, a call for an alliance she could not have conceived. And from the tree line, emerging from the torrential downpour, as if conjured by the storm itself, came more lions. 3 lionesses, their eyes burning like embers in the deluge, and the massive, formidable storm-maned male, his mane a dark, dripping halo around his powerful head. They fanned out, their movements precise, forming a defiant, living defensive line in front of the station, protecting the humans and Whisper's cub alike. The buffalo, sensing the impenetrable wall of predators, instinctively veered. The lead animals hesitated, then split, the entire stampede parting like a river around an immovable rock. The ground shuddered as thousands of hooves thundered past the station, a blur of dark bodies and flying mud, leaving behind a wake of churned earth and deafening silence. As the last of the herd faded into the rain-swept distance, Imani felt tears blurring her vision, hot against her rain-soaked cheeks. Her voice, when it came, was a choked whisper. "She chose to protect us," she said, her voice breaking. "She sees us as hers." It was an affirmation that transcended science, a spiritual connection forged in the heart of chaos. The pride, their bodies dripping wet, chests heaving, regrouped. They chuffed softly, nuzzling against Whisper, a silent acknowledgement of her extraordinary decision. Then, with the storm still raging, they melted back into the shadows of the savannah, leaving behind only the drumming rain and the profound realization that the bond between them had crossed from remarkable to utterly unbreakable. This alliance, born of desperate need and impossible gratitude, was now bound by a shared survival. The storm, having cleansed the land, left behind a reborn savannah. Every leaf shimmered, every blade of grass vibrated with renewed life. Imani walked the clearing around her station, the damp earth soft beneath her boots. She traced the indelible marks left by the recent chaos, the deep grooves of the buffalo stampede, and interwoven with them, the unmistakable paw prints of an entire lion pride, Whisper, Storm Main, and the others, a silent testament to their incredible defense. Whisper returned, her now thriving cub, Moyo Heart, bounding clumsily at her heels. They approached with a familiar, respectful distance, but this time Whisper carried a fresh gazelle. She laid it as before near the porch. Moyo, a ball of playful energy, nosed at the kill, then, with an almost human gesture, looked up at Imani, an invitation in his intelligent eyes. The lines between their worlds were not just blurred, they were dissolving. Imani meticulously documented every interaction, every offering. She had resisted anthropomorphizing, but now the only word that truly fit was kinship. Juma, once a staunch skeptic, watched these unfolding phenomena with a quiet awe. "They've truly accepted us," he'd murmured, his voice filled with a reverence Imani shared. The pride's presence became a subtle, consistent reassurance. They were often sighted near the station, their powerful forms moving like shadows in the periphery, their presence a silent vow. Moyo, driven by an insatiable curiosity, would often pad closer to Imani, his mother watching, allowing this unprecedented interaction. One serene evening, a moment of profound significance unfolded. Moyo, emboldened by his growing trust, padded right to the edge of the porch steps. Slowly, deliberately, he extended a small paw, claws sheathed, and gently, tentatively touched the weathered wood of the step. Whisper watched from a short distance, her gaze unwavering, granting silent permission for this ultimate act of interspecies trust. "They're teaching him about you, Imani," Juma whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "We're part of his education, part of his world." This harmony, however, was violently shattered. A rogue male, a brutal, solitary force emerged from the bush, intent on challenging Storm Main and claiming the pride, a clear and present danger to Moyo. The roar of the challenge ripped through the night, a chilling declaration of war. The entire prod, with Storm Main at its lead, rose to defend their family. The battle was fierce, a terrifying symphony of snarls and powerful blows. The rogue, driven by primal instinct, posed a direct threat not only to Moyo's life, but, by extension, to the fragile peace of the station. The pride fought with an intensity born of familial protection, their roars reverberating through the savannah. Finally, the rogue, battered and bleeding, was repelled, disappearing back into the darkness from which he came. In the aftermath, as the pride regrouped, Storm Main, his massive body still heaving, his eyes burning with the recent battle, locked gazes with Imani. Then, with a subtle, profound gesture that mirrored Whisper's earlier acknowledgement, he dipped his mighty head. The leader of the pride, the king of this domain, had recognized her. But the reprieve was short-lived. While tracking a freshwater source the next morning, seeking to understand the movements of the disturbed game after the skirmish, Imani stumbled upon something far more unsettling than a rogue lion. Near a critical water point, partially hidden by newly sprouted reeds, she discovered a series of perfectly cylindrical holes drilled deep into the earth. They were unnaturally precise, uniform in diameter, and far too perfect to be anything natural or the work of any known poaching activity. These were not animal burrows, nor the crude pits of desperate villagers. She knelt, her gloved fingers tracing the smooth edges of the boreholes. Around them, faintly, she detected an unusual, almost chemical-like residue clinging to the soil. It wasn't the foul pollution of typical human waste, nor the grime of machinery oil. It was something manufactured, something alien to the raw earth. "This isn't a trap," Imani muttered, her voice tight with a dawning dread. She ran her hand over the perfectly geometric precision, the stark contrast between the wild earth and this alien intrusion. "This is surveying, but for what?" The chilling realization solidified. The threat was far greater than simple poaching. This was a systematic intrusion, methodical and technologically advanced. This hinted at a deeper, darker agenda, A corporate or governmental operation with designs on the land itself. A threat that went beyond a single life, perhaps even beyond her comprehension. This was a calculated invasion, and she, unknowingly, was now caught in its crosshairs. If you've been with us so far, you know Dr. Imani Kijani has witnessed the impossible, a bond with the Mayan that defies all logic. But what's coming next will shock you to your core. The danger is no longer theoretical, it's immediate, life-threatening, and it confirms Imani's deepest fears about a conspiracy far grander and more sinister than anyone could imagine. You don't want to miss a single second of this, so hit that like button, share with your friends, and subscribe to unravel this mystery with us. An unnatural, heavy silence fell over the savannah. The usual symphony of chirps and rustles, the distant calls of birds, all hushed. Imani, perched on her porch, felt a profound, chilling unease seep into her bones. The air itself seemed to vibrate with an impending threat. Whisper waited at the clearing's edge, a taut, powerful silhouette. Beside her Moyo, no longer a helpless cub, but still vulnerable, cowered slightly, sensing his mother's tension. Whisper's amber gaze was fixed on the distant horizon, not on Imani, a clear signal that the danger lay out there, not within their improbable family. Juma, his weathered face grim, raised his binoculars. His voice, when he spoke, was a low growl. Poachers. Two figures emerged from the dappled light of the pre-dawn, moving with a practiced, predatory caution. Rifles slung, they moved like ghosts. Whisper let out a low, deep rumble from her chest, a sound that vibrated with primal warning. Then her eyes locked with Imani's. It was a silent summoning, a profound plea for intervention. "She's asking us," Juma muttered, stunned by the audacity of the request, but recognizing its desperate truth. Imani frantically grabbed her satellite phone, punching the emergency frequency to base. Only static answered, a cruel, mocking hiss. The storm had damaged the radio, leaving them isolated. "We're on our own," Juma cursed softly, the realization a cold dread in the pit of Imani's stomach. The figures drew closer, their forms becoming clearer in the fading gloom. They weren't the desperate, ragged poachers Imani knew. These were disciplined, equipped. The glint of advanced thermal scopes was unmistakable, reflecting the last vestiges of moonlight, the sleek, angular lines of silenced rifles. This wasn't a desperate hunt, this was a high-tech operation, a calculated strike. Whisper padded forward, a heartbreaking decision etched in her eyes. She nudged Moyo, gently guiding him behind the sturdy porch steps, a place of perceived safety. "She's putting her cub here with us," Imani whispered, the words choked with emotion, understanding the depth of trust, the impossible gamble Whisper was taking. Then Whisper turned, her powerful shoulders rolling, her focus solely on the approaching threat. She intended to meet them alone, to protect her cub and, inexplicably, her human allies. "If she goes alone, they'll kill her," Juma warned, his voice urgent. Imani's mind raced. All protocol, all scientific ethics screamed against intervention. But the image of Moyo, vulnerable behind the steps, and Whisper, willing to sacrifice herself, obliterated all training. "Then we don't let her go alone," Imani declared, her voice trembling but resolute. She grabbed the emergency flares and leaped into the driver's seat of the Land Rover. Juma scrambling into the passenger side, horn already pressed, an ear-splitting blare shattering the dawn silence. They drove hard, the Land Rover roaring to life, its headlights cutting through the pre-dawn gloom like twin beams of defiance. Imani aimed a flare gun, firing. Its red streak blazed across the dark sky, a screaming comet of warning. At the same moment, Whisper erupted from the tall grass, a primal roar tearing from her throat, drowning out all other sounds, a thunderous symphony of rage and protection. The poachers faltered, caught between the charging vehicle, its horn blaring a chaotic symphony, the blinding flare, and the furious Lioness. Their disciplined formation broke. One raised a high-tech rifle, but the sudden combined assault was too much. They broke, retreating into the bush with frantic haste, leaving behind discarded gear in their panic. Imani brought the Land Rover to a screeching halt. She jumped out, her heart hammering. On the churned earth, amidst footprints and discarded equipment, lay several sleek, compact devices. Imani knelt, her hands trembling as she picked one up. It was a specialized tracking device, military grade, far beyond anything traditional poachers would possess. The sophisticated design, the advanced materials, the chilling precision of its engineering. This was no desperate hunt for bushmeat or traditional trophy. This confirmed her darkest fears. The threat wasn't just individual poachers, but a corporate or governmental involvement. This was an organized, well-funded operation, and she and the Pride were now directly in its crosshairs, facing a sinister plot that stretched far beyond the savannah. Dusk settled, painting the Samburu savannah in fiery hues of orange and purple, a stark contrast to the chaotic dawn. Imani sat on the porch, her notebook untouched, the scientific meticulously collected data now feeling utterly irrelevant. Her mind reeled from the morning's confrontation, the adrenaline still thrumming beneath her skin, the image of Whisper's charging form burned into her memory. Juma, restless and uncharacteristically quiet, paced nearby. "This can't last, Imani," he muttered, his voice low, filled with a new kind of trepidation. "We've changed things for them. For us." His words hung in the air, acknowledging the irreversible shift in their world. Then Whisper's soft chuffing calls rippled through the clearing, a familiar sound now imbued with new meaning. She emerged from the fading light, Moyo, a playful shadow, at her heels. But this time she was not alone. The entire Pride followed, a solemn, powerful procession of golden forms moving with silent grace. They stopped within 30 yards of the porch, their eyes, reflective embers in the twilight, fixed on Imani. There was no fear in Imani now, only a radiant, almost spiritual anticipation. She braced herself for whatever this unprecedented gathering signified. The Storm-Mane male, magnificent and imposing, stepped forward. His powerful presence seemed to crush the very air. He advanced slowly, deliberately, stopping a mere 15 yards from Imani. Then with a profound, almost ritualistic solemnity, he lowered his massive head to the earth. A deep, silent bow. Whisper followed, her head dipping in turn. Then one by one, each lioness of the Pride repeated the gesture, a silent chorus of acknowledgement, acceptance, kinship. It was an unspoken vow, a sacred pact forged in shared danger. Moyo, oblivious to the profound gravity of the moment, chirped playfully, then scrambled back to his mother's side. Slowly as one, the Pride began to withdraw, melting back into the deepening shadows of the savannah. Before vanishing completely, the Storm-Mane paused, turning his head. His eyes locked with Imani's, a gaze that carried the weight of their shared fight, of their unbreakable bond, a promise of alliance. "They didn't just accept you," Juma whispered, utterly awestruck, his voice thick with emotion. "They honored you." Imani looked down at the sleek, high-tech tracking device she had salvaged from the chaotic scene that morning. A stark, unnatural contrast to the wild beauty of her surroundings. She remembered the perfectly drilled holes, the faint chemical residue, the composite snare. These weren't random poachers or isolated incidents. This was a coordinated operation, chillingly precise, employing advanced technology. They weren't just after animals for trophies or bushmeat. They were targeting something deeper, more valuable. The land's resources, perhaps, or even the unique, unprecedented animal behaviors she was now documenting. The realization coalesced, sharp and cold. The threat was a shadow syndicate, a powerful unseen entity with a hidden agenda, leveraging cutting-edge technology, possibly even backed by corporate or governmental power, systematically trying to exploit the wilderness. They were likely behind the drilling, the specialized snares, the targeted hunts. This wasn't simply a fight for individual lives. It was a battle for the very soul of the savannah. Imani understood her new mission. Her role was no longer just to observe. It was to protect this impossible bond, to stand as an unlikely guardian, and to expose the deeper, human conspiracy threatening it all. She was embarking on a dangerous path where science, survival, and a primal alliance would collide with the calculating machinery of exploitation. The fight had only just begun. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the savannah in an ethereal glow, but the peace was deceptive. Dr. Imani Kijani stood on her porch, the weight of an impossible alliance settled upon her shoulders. The silent bow of the Storm-Mane, the unwavering trust of Whisper, and the innocent playfulness of Moyo had transformed her understanding of the wild, shattering the rigid protocols of her scientific world. Yet, clutched in her hand, the sleek, high-tech tracking device served as a stark reminder of the looming darkness. The drilled holes, the composite snares, the technologically equipped poachers, these were not random acts. They were threads of a meticulously woven web, a shadow syndicate, operating with chilling precision, their hidden agenda threatening to unravel the very fabric of the wilderness she had sworn to protect. Imani was no longer just a researcher. She was an accidental guardian, a bridge between two worlds. Her path ahead was fraught with peril, a dangerous dance between scientific truth and primal survival. She had forged an unbreakable bond, and now she would fight to expose the human conspiracy that dared to challenge it, no matter the cost. The future of the Samburu, and perhaps her own, depended on it.